My son looked me in the eye on his 28th birthday, surrounded by friends in our $800,000 home, and sneered, "The best gift would be if you disappeared forever." That cruel wish cut deeper than any knife. But he had no idea. I was about to grant it most shockingly, turning his arrogance into the downfall he never saw coming. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sat alone in the living room, the evening light stretching across the wooden floorboards I had installed with my own hands more than 3 decades ago. The house was quiet now, so quiet I could hear the clock ticking above the fireplace where Margaret's photograph still sat, her smile frozen in time, watching me with the same warmth she had on the day we moved in. That silence pressed on my chest heavier than any weight I had ever carried, because it was here, in this same house worth nearly $600,000, that I had learned the truth of my son's betrayal. Jason wanted to sell it. My home, the place where I raised him, the place where I buried my love into every corner. He wanted it gone, and me with it, tucked away into some sterile nursing facility as if I were nothing more than an old piece of furniture too inconvenient to keep. The betrayal gnawed at me, dragging me back through the years. I remembered those endless nights I spent working overtime shifts, the smell of oil and sweat clinging to me as I tried to keep the bills paid and the future bright for him. $60,000 in tuition, 4 years of college that I scraped together, sometimes skipping my own doctor's appointments, sometimes patching up old shoes instead of buying new ones, all so he could walk across that stage and collect his diploma. I remembered signing the check for $25,000 for that shiny new car he wanted so badly. A car he drove around campus like a king, while I drove my rusted Ford until it coughed itself into the ground. I even remember the $10,000 I handed him for that trip to Europe, watching his eyes sparkle with excitement, thinking maybe he would finally see the world with gratitude, maybe he would come back a man who understood the value of sacrifice. But he never did. He came back with souvenirs and stories, and not once did he say, "Thank you, Dad." The walls of this house carried every echo of those years. Jason's laughter bouncing down the hallways when he was a boy, the smell of Margaret's pot roast drifting out of the kitchen on Sundays, the Christmas mornings where torn wrapping paper littered the floor like confetti while Jason tore into gifts we could barely afford. I had kept this house together not just with money, but with memory, with love, with Margaret's gentle voice reminding me, "Home is where the family learns who they are." Yet now, my son looked at this place as nothing more than an asset to be cashed out, a number on a piece of paper, a property he believed he was entitled to by birthright. The sting of that realization was sharper than any wound I had ever known. I heard his voice replaying in my head, the cruel words that had slipped from his lips when he thought I was not listening. "The old man just uses money to control me," I remember freezing in the hallway, the sound of Jason's laughter mingling with Emily's soft agreement, a dagger twisting deeper with every chuckle. Control? Was that what he thought all those sacrifices were? Control? Every late-night shift, every penny saved, every meal skipped so I could make sure his tuition was paid, his dreams were funded, his life was easier than mine had ever been. He saw it all as manipulation. I gripped the arm of my chair so tightly my knuckles turned white, as though I could hold myself together before the rage and sorrow split me in half. For a moment, I almost wished Margaret were still here so I could collapse into her arms and let her tell me it would be all right. Instead, I looked at her photograph, my eyes blurring, and whispered, "You see, don't you, Maggie? You see what he's become." Saying it aloud made the silence heavier. I thought of the promise I made to her when she was sick, that I would protect Jason, guide him, never let him feel abandoned. But now I was the one abandoned, cast aside by the very child I had built my life around. The pain burned, but beneath it something else began to stir, something sharper, something stronger than grief. The truth rolled over me like a storm. I had been blind for 28 years, blinded by love, by obligation, by the desperate hope that if I gave enough, if I bled enough, Jason would turn into the man his mother had dreamed he would be. But all I had done was feed his entitlement, fatten his greed, and allow him to grow into someone who believed he deserved everything without ever earning it. The recognition of that fact left me trembling. My sacrifices were not invisible, they were despised. That shift, that terrible clarity, sparked something fierce in me. I leaned back in the chair, the old leather creaking, and let the anger solidify into resolve. I was not a man to be pitied, not some frail relic to be swept into a corner. My years had given me wisdom, not weakness. Jason thought he had the upper hand, but he underestimated me. He had no idea that the very documents he ignored, the deeds, the insurance papers, the small but important details he thought an old man like me couldn't manage, were mine to protect, mine to wield. My eyes drifted to the drawer in the old oak desk by the window, the same desk where Margaret used to write letters to her sister. I knew what lay inside, the deeds, the insurance forms, the signatures that would decide the future of this home and everything it stood for. The thought of Jason's arrogance, of his laughter as he plotted with Emily to strip me of the last piece of dignity I had, only sharpened my focus. I whispered again to Margaret's photo, but this time the words were different. "I'll protect it, Maggie. I'll protect what we built. He won't take this from us." My voice was steady now, carrying the steel that had replaced my sorrow. I rose from the chair, the house creaking beneath my steps, and moved toward the desk. My hand hovered over the drawer, and in that moment I felt the weight of the years shift. I was no longer the victim of betrayal. I was the man who had built a life from nothing, who had weathered storms and buried the love of his life, who had raised a son with everything he had. And now I was the man who would not let it all be destroyed. The drawer slid open with a quiet groan, and the papers inside waited like old allies. I reached for them, my fingers brushing over the crisp edges, and I felt a new sense of power settle into my bones. This was not the end. This was the beginning of my answer. Jason thought he had written the final chapter of my story, but he was wrong. The pen was still in my hand, and as I stood there in the fading light of the house that had been my fortress, I knew with absolute certainty the next move would be mine. If you're watching this while on the go, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications if you haven't already. I stepped through the sliding door with the cake still trembling in my hands and the wrapped gift tucked under my arm. The April air had the kind of warmth that makes a backyard feel like a living room, and Jason's friends were scattered across the patio with paper plates and beer bottles, laughing too loudly over the music. The grill hissed, the speakers thumped, and in the middle of it all, my son stood like a ringmaster, soaking in attention he hadn't earned. He didn't see me at first. None of them did. For a second, I let myself imagine a different scene. Jason turning, smiling, calling me over, taking the cake, setting it down, clapping me on the back, and saying thank you. It lasted about as long as a match head. "Jason," I said, setting the cake on the outdoor table and keeping my voice even. "Can we talk privately for a minute?" He didn't turn toward me. Kyle saw me first and smirked. "Uh-oh, the boomer audit." Laughter rippled through the group. Emily stood near the patio lights with a plastic cup, eyes flicking between me and Jason like she was watching a tennis match she'd already bet on. Jason finally faced me, that bored, empty smile pasted on. "What, Dad?" he said, dragging the word like a broom over gravel. "If this is about the music or the trash cans or something, we're good. It's my birthday." "It's about respect," I said, and the word felt fragile in my mouth. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." "Respect?" Kyle echoed, laughing outright. "Bro, he's doing a TED Talk." More laughter. Someone turned the music down a notch, not out of courtesy, but curiosity. The scent of burger grease and beer swam through the light. "I just want to say something without an audience," I tried again. "Please." Jason took a long, showy sip, set his beer on the railing, and walked up to me. He was close enough that I could see the stubble he hadn't bothered to shave, the flush from the drinks, The little crease he gets between his eyebrows when he's gearing up to be cruel. He didn't lower his voice. "Here's the thing, Dad," he said. "You don't need an audience, because we all already know the speech, the same one you've been giving me since I was 10. Responsibility, gratitude, blah, blah, blah. You keep a ledger only you care about." A few people chuckled. Emily looked at her nails, then at me, and for a second I saw it, the tiny lift of a lip that meant she enjoyed this. "It's his day, Robert," she said, like she was smoothing a tablecloth over a stain. I swallowed. "And it's my home." Jason's smile thinned. "Right? Your home, your rules, which you never let me forget." He reached for the wrap box under my arm without asking. "What's this?" "It's from me," I said. "From the family." The word family caught on the way out like a fishbone. He tore the paper with theatrical impatience, as if he were demonstrating how little he cared whether it was a sweater or a brick. The small wooden box slid into his palm. He glanced at it, unimpressed, and popped the lid with his thumb. The gold watch winked in the string lights, the face catching a line of flame from the grill. My father's watch. Edward wore it to every Sunday service, every wedding, every funeral. I'd had it polished 2 days ago. The tiny engraving on the back, EM to RM, had never looked sharper. Kyle leaned in. "What is that, like an antique?" Jason lifted the watch by the band like it was a baitfish. "An antique," he repeated, and then he looked at me, really looked, and I knew what was about to happen. "You think I'm supposed to chain myself to your past?" he said. "Who even wears this?" "Jason," I started, but he had already let it go. It hit the flagstone with a sound that was somehow both small and enormous, a clean metallic crack that shut my throat. The crystal spiderwebbed. The second hand leapt, then froze at a wrong time. It would keep forever. Kyle whooped. "Who even wants that junk?" Someone laughed so hard they coughed. Emily didn't flinch. She took another sip, and the ice in her cup clinked like glass on glass. I felt Margaret at my shoulder the way I have ever since the morning I couldn't wake her up. I heard her voice as clearly as if she were standing in the doorway. "Breathe, Robert." Only this time, the breath I took wasn't to steady myself. It was to keep myself from picking the watch up and using it to teach my son what things cost. Jason shrugged. "You can have it back," he said, as if he were doing me a favor by sparing me the labor of stooping. "You keep trying to hand me the past like it's a baton, but I'm not running in your race." I bent down because somebody had to. The band had a faint nick where the metal met the pin. The dial's hairline fractures reflected the string lights in crooked ladders. I closed my hand around it carefully, as if my fingers could press time flat again. When I stood, everyone was watching to see if I would cry. I didn't give them that. "That belonged to your grandfather," I said. "He believed time was something you honored." Jason smirked. "Time's for clocks, Dad, not for people." There it was, the cruelty so casual it could be mistaken for style. I slid the watch into my pocket and let go of whatever last soft thing in me was still hoping for a different ending. I looked out at the crowd that had collected, the neighbors' kids who recognized a better party, the old friends who'd been starving for new drama, the strangers who had followed the noise. This was a stage now. I hadn't asked to be on it, but I was up here. I could either drop my lines or deliver them. "You wanted private," Jason said, lifting his voice so everyone could hear anyway. "But here's what I want, since it's my birthday. The best gift would be if he disappears." He jerked a thumb at me. Laughter broke over the patio like a wave. "For real this time." The phrase lodged somewhere behind my ribs the way a shard of glass does, small, hard, and bright. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence work for me the way it never had when he was a teenager and I was too tired to hold a boundary. I thought of every check I had written, every night I had driven him across town at midnight because he'd forgotten a book or needed a tool or had gotten himself into a situation he couldn't solve. I thought of the rust on my truck and the shine on his car, the envelope of cash I'd slipped into his palm when he didn't make rent for that off-campus apartment, the way he had looked right over my shoulder to see who else was in the room. "They think I'm weak," I heard myself say inside my head, calm as a stone in a river. "Let them think it one more minute." Out loud I said, "Enjoy your cake." I picked up the box lid because even dust deserves a home, and I turned my back on the stage. Inside, the house swallowed the noise in a few paces. The smell of burgers and beer gave way to pledge and lemon, the scents of my life. I set the cake knife on the counter, rinsed my hands so I wouldn't get frosting on the phone, and took the watch out of my pocket. The second hand was still stuck. I laid it gently in the drawer where I keep Margaret's glasses and the little pewter frame that holds our wedding photo. "I'm sorry, Edward," I whispered. "Your grandson isn't the man you hoped." Then I reached for the landline because I wanted a cord under my hand, something solid and tethered. "Howard and Shaw," the receptionist said. "It's Robert Miller," I answered. "I need to speak to Mr. Howard. It's urgent." There was a click and another click, and then the voice I'd known since he coached our boys' Little League teams came on the line. "Robert," Howard said, "you don't call me on a Saturday unless something's on fire. What's going on?" "It's not fire," I said. "It's rot. Jason just told me. The words were, 'The best gift would be if you disappeared.' He said it in my backyard, in front of 20 people. He threw my father's watch at the ground like it was nothing." Howard was quiet for a second, the way good lawyers get quiet when they're weighing which lever to pull. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I'm sorry about the watch. And the words. Tell me what you need." "I need to know where I stand," I said. "Legally. The house is in my name. The mortgage is paid. The property taxes are current. The title is clear. He's been staying here. No lease. No rent. He brings people over without asking. He uses my credit cards sometimes, says he'll pay me back, and doesn't. I need to know what I can do tonight, and what I can do next week, and what I should be planning for next month." "All right," he said, and I could hear the creak of his leather chair. "Tonight, you don't escalate violence. You don't put your hands on anyone. You don't brandish anything. You can ask people to leave your property. If they refuse, you can call the police to assist. As for Jason, adult children can become a legal occupant even without a lease if you allow them long enough, but the fact pattern matters. You want a clean record of your revoked permission. That's step 1. Step 2 is documentation, deed, tax receipts, utility bills in your name. Step 3 is financial containment. Any joint cards?" "No joint," I said, and my voice tasted like metal. He memorized the numbers on one of mine. "Call and cancel that card," he said. "Tonight. Request a new number. Put fraud alerts on your file. Change passwords. If you've given him keys, consider a locksmith in the morning, though if he's considered a resident, that's complicated. We'll thread that needle. Do not argue about money out there. Do not let him bait you. You end the party. You disengage. Call me Monday morning at 9. I'll have a notice drafted. We'll do this by the book, so it holds." My hand tightened around the receiver. "By the book?" I repeated, and felt a steadiness I hadn't had in days. "Howard, one more thing. If I tell him and his friends to leave and he refuses, can the police remove him?" "In many jurisdictions," Howard said carefully, "if the owner terminates permission for a gathering and a person refuses to comply with police orders to leave, that's trespass. The wrinkle is the resident status. Some officers will treat it as a civil matter if it's the son. But the guests? Absolutely. And a continued breach of the peace? They don't like that." I looked out the kitchen window. A cluster of kids had started a drinking game with red cups at my patio table. Someone had propped the gate open with my toolbox. Jason was back at the grill, telling a story big enough to need both hands. "Thank you," I said. "I'll call the bank. And Howard?" "Yes?" "They think I've lost," I said, and heard the new timbre in my voice. "But the game is just beginning." He exhaled, a half laugh, half sigh. "That's the Robert I know. Keep a cool head. Paper beats shouting." When I hung up, I stood still for a count of 5, the way you do after an earthquake when you're testing whether the floor has truly stopped moving. Then I reached for my wallet. The card with the number Jason knew was the one with the American flag in the corner, the one I'd had since Margaret's chemo days when points meant free gas. I dialed the number on the back and waded through the music. "Card services," a woman said. "How can I help you?" "I need to report a compromised card and request a new number," I said, effective immediately. We went through the script, name, address, and the last 3 transactions. "There's a charge here from a liquor store on 8th, she said, $93.89. "That would be the party in my backyard," I said, and the flatness in my tone surprised me. "Cancel it. Everything afternoon today? Cancel. I'll pay for the burgers, not the circus." She paused, then said, "I'm sorry about your situation, sir." "So am I said, and hung up before the compassion cracked me. Next was the email password. I changed it to the name of the lake where Margaret and I used to fish. I changed the bank login to the make and model of my first truck. I changed the streaming service he'd loaded with his shows to a phrase he would never guess. Respect is earned. Then I opened the old oak desk drawer and took out the folder with the house documents, the deed, the property tax receipts, the home insurance declaration page with my name at the top. I ran my fingers along the embossed county seal and felt something like the old pleasure of holding a diploma. I heard a bottle shatter outside, followed by the kind of laughter that comes from the relief of not having to care about consequences. I closed the folder and set it on the kitchen table. There was a yellow legal pad in the drawer. I pulled it out and began to write, because writing turns chaos into lines. End party. Call Howard Monday at 9 a.m. Document ownership, scan deed, insurance, taxes. Call 3 agents for home valuation. Appraisal, staging. Remove Jason from cards, accounts, and passwords. Draft letter revoking permission to host guests. The plan came together faster than I expected, like the framing of a house when the pieces have been measured correctly. I wasn't promising myself revenge. I was promising myself order. Margaret would have approved. She believed in lists. She believed in the way an ordinary pen could change a life if you used it to sign the right line. I picked up the watch again, and for a second, the cracked face looked like a map of roads I could travel to get exactly where I needed to go. "He wants me gone," I told the empty kitchen. "Fine." I slipped the watch into my pocket so I would feel the weight of it when I walked back outside. The music had crept louder while I was inside. When I stepped into the yard again, heads turned, not because they respected me, but because the show had returned. I didn't pick up the microphone yet. Not yet. I walked to the grill where Jason was flipping burgers with the confidence of a host who thinks a spatula is a scepter. "Jason," I said, "wrap it up. Tell your friends the party is over in 15 minutes. He laughed in my face, a dry, ugly sound. "This is my party," he said, flicking grease toward the flame. "These are my friends." "They are on my property," I said, "and I am ending it." He glanced over my shoulder at the crowd, checking his audience like always. "Listen to this guy," he said, and Kyle obligingly chuckled. "He thinks this is the 1950s. He thinks he can just say a thing, and it happens." "Sometimes it does," I said. 15 minutes, then I call the police." Kyle raised his beer. "Call 'em now, cowboy." A few people murmured assent, the brat pack bravery that comes from standing inside somebody else's house and confusing it with your own. I didn't argue. I didn't explain property law to drunks. I walked to the folding table by the speakers and wrote in block letters on the legal pad, "Party ends in 15 min, please leave." I taped it to the cooler. I turned the music down 2 notches. I began folding the extra lawn chairs, one by one, not hurrying, not asking for help, just closing the legs and setting them by the back door because a chair folded is a message. Your comfort is no longer the priority in this space. Emily sidled up to Jason and put a hand on his arm. "He's bluffing," she said, but she didn't sound entirely sure. Her eyes kept darting to the gate, where a couple of neighbors with kids had already slipped out. The oxygen of the party was thinning. Jason slammed the lid of the grill. "No one's leaving," he announced, voice raised. "My dad's being dramatic. Everyone stay." I met his eyes and for once didn't look away first. "You're a guest here, Jason," I said. "Act like one." The word guest did what I meant it to do. It put a frame around his behavior and a limit around his claim. He hated that frame. I could see it land. The little vein at his temple started to pulse. He stepped toward me so close I could smell beer and cheap cologne. He lowered his voice just enough to make the next cruelty intimate. "You're not going to do anything," he said. "You're a lonely old man with a dead wife and a house you cling to because you have nothing else. Without me, you'd be shouting at a wall." My hand went to the watch in my pocket like it could keep me from shaking. The second hand, stuck at the wrong time, pressed back into my palm. I thought of the first time I held Jason, how small he was, the way his fingers instinctively closed around mine and squeezed like he already knew I belonged to him. That memory used to make me weep. Now it made me steady. I leaned in, so only he could hear me. "You just made your last withdrawal on my patience," I said. "In 15 minutes, you make your last withdrawal on my property. Or you can make your first withdrawal from a county holding cell. Your choice." He blinked, thrown for a millisecond by the change in my tone, and then he tried to cover it with a sneer. "You won't," he said. "You never do." "We'll see," I thought, but I didn't give him that line. I walked away again, because walking away can be the strongest thing a man does when he refuses to follow a fool into a ditch. I took the cake back inside. I cut myself a slice and ate it, standing up over the sink the way a widower eats, tidy, efficient, no ceremony. It tasted like store-bought sugar and something else I could only call resolve. When I returned, the party had begun to fray at the edges. The kids at the red cups were gathering their jackets. The couple from up the block, sensible people, were saying goodnights with apologetic smiles. Kyle, though, had decided this was the hill to die on. He had climbed onto one of my patio chairs like a boy on a stump. "Nobody move!" he crowed. "The sheriff of Boomertown is about to deputize the neighbor watch." I didn't look at him. I looked at Jason. 5 minutes, I said. He lifted his beer in a toast I didn't deserve and swallowed it in 3 long, loud gulps. Then, because there's always an encore to a cruelty, he pointed at my pocket. "Hey, Dad, how's Grandpa's clock?" The laughter spiked again, brittle and bright. I didn't give them the satisfaction of touching the watch. I let the weight of it speak only to me. In my mind, I was already in Howard's office with the deed on the desk, with the letter drafted, with my signature flowing clean and final. Paper beats shouting. The phrase, Howard's phrase, rang in my head like a bell. I checked my watch, the one you buy at a drugstore when you stop counting years and start counting days. 15 minutes were up. I walked to the table with the mixer and the cheap microphone. I picked it up, felt how light it was, how powerless in the hand, until a voice traveled through it. I didn't press the switch yet. I set it down carefully, like the last piece before a machine roars to life. Not now, not this chapter. Instead, I turned and scanned the yard one more time, not looking for sympathy, but for angles, exits, liabilities. The side gate, the path to the driveway, the neighbor's windows. Then I drew a long breath and let it out, like a tide going slack. The decision was made. The timing mattered. The next move would be mine in the open. I went back inside and opened the desk drawer again. The folder waited where I'd left it, steady and square. I pulled out the deed and laid it flat on the kitchen table. The embossed seal caught the overhead light, and for a second it looked like a medal pinned to a uniform. I set my hand on the page and said it aloud, because words shape reality. "This is my house," I said. "This is my name. This is my boundary." The porch laughter leaked through the glass in thin bursts like static. The clock above the fireplace ticked toward the hour. I took out my phone and typed a note I knew I would need later. At 8:47 p.m., I told Jason and his guests to leave. At 9:02 p.m., I reiterated the request. At 9:15 p.m., I prepared to end the party. Documentation. Not because I wanted to sue my son, but because I was done living in a world where everything was he said, she said, and I was always the one who folded. Before I closed the drawer, I touched the cracked watch again. "You kept better time than any of us," I told Edward. "I'm late, but I'm here." Then I slid it into my pocket and felt its face against my palm, a cool coin of courage. When I stepped out the last time that night, Jason was still performing. He had his arm around Emily's shoulders and was telling one of those stories that ends with him as the clever survivor of a system stacked against him. Emily laughed in the right places and looked at me like the punchline. Kyle had fresh beer foam on his lip and the swagger of a man who only fights battles in other men's homes. I took it all in without letting any of it in. My voice, when I finally spoke, was ordinary, the same voice I used to ask a clerk for change. "It's over," I said. "Wrap it up." Kyle clapped slowly. "He's serious, folks." Jason lifted his hands as if he could part the air. "Look, everybody chill," he said, the peacemaker when peace cost him nothing. "My dad's just done." I finished for him and turned away. I didn't need their faces anymore. What I needed was already laid out on my kitchen table, ink and paper and a plan. I closed the sliding door behind me and locked it. The latch clicked with the satisfying precision of a decision finally made. The house hummed its familiar hum, the fridge cycling, the heater settling, the old pipes keeping secrets in the walls. I walked down the hall to the bedroom and took out the small safe from the closet shelf. The combination, Margaret's birthday, rolled under my fingers, and the door swung open on a soft exhale. Inside, passports, life insurance, the title to the truck, a letter Margaret had written and sealed for Jason the year he turned 18 and never opened because he said he was too busy. I placed the deed folder next to them, then took out the spare keys to the house, the ones I had hidden from myself after Margaret died because the silence was too loud, and I was afraid I'd drive somewhere and forget why I left. I went back to the kitchen, set the keys beside the legal pad, and dialed the first of 3 numbers I had written under agents. A voicemail. The second picked up, a firm, efficient voice that knew the market on my street better than I did. "Hi, this is Carol," she said. "How can I help?" "I'm exploring a sale," I said. 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,900 square feet, built 1978, new roof in 2016, hardwood I installed myself, corner lot. I want to know how fast we could move and what numbers we're talking about. She asked for my email. She promised comps by morning. She said words like clean title, cash buyer, off market, if you want quiet, escrow timeline. I thanked her and hung up, and for the first time in months, I felt something like oxygen reach the bottom of my lungs. Options are air. Plans are food. I stood there another moment, listening to the muffled party sounds and the smaller, steadier sounds of my house, and I knew exactly where Chapter 4 would begin. Not with pleading, not with an argument in the dark that nobody could remember right later. It would begin with my voice in a microphone, clear and factual, and then with the only leverage that ever holds, ownership enforced by people in uniforms who do not care about family dramas, only about the law. I looked up at Margaret's picture over the fireplace. The glass reflected the kitchen light in a soft ring that made her eyes look almost alive. "They think I've already lost you," I told her quietly. "But I still have what we built, and I'm going to protect it the only way anyone respects anymore. On paper, out loud, in daylight." Sheet. The cake sat under a loose square of foil, the frosting dented where I'd pressed it down with my thumb. I cut another thin slice and wrapped it for the fridge, because tomorrow is made of small, practical mercies. On the legal pad, under the last item, I wrote one more line. "They don't know I'm ready." Then I clicked off the kitchen light and let the yard's noise shrink to a buzz behind glass. 15 minutes later, the applause outside had died down to a scatter of voices. A gate banged, tires rolled over gravel. The speakers burped and went still. I didn't open the door to check. I didn't need to. I had already set the stage for the only confrontation that mattered, the kind where a man stops explaining himself and starts asserting his rights. The kind where a father stops asking to be loved and starts insisting on being respected, even if the only person he earns that respect from is the one in the mirror. When I finally sat on the edge of the bed, the house settling around me like a tired animal, I took the cracked watch from my pocket and set it on the nightstand. The second hand hadn't moved. Mine had. I lay back and stared at the ceiling and listened to my heart steady into a rhythm that felt like a drum before a parade. In the morning, there would be numbers and signatures and phone calls. Before that, there would be one more scene outside, beneath the string lights, a hard scene, but a necessary one. I closed my eyes and saw Margaret's face as clearly as the day she said yes in front of the courthouse judge. "They think I've lost," I said into the dark, and the words didn't shake. But the game is just beginning. If you're watching this while on the go, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications if you haven't already. I didn't sleep. I waited for the yard to thin and for my resolve to harden. When the laughter finally hiccuped into silence, I stepped onto the patio with the microphone in my hand. The string lights made halos on the flagstones. My son stood at the grill as if a spatula were a scepter. I pressed the switch and gave the line I had rehearsed in my head all night. "The party is over. Everyone, leave my property." Property did the work. Heads lifted, conversations broke, the music dimmed. Emily froze with a red cup midair. Kyle squinted like a punchline had gone missing. I kept my voice steady. "You are guests. I am the owner. This is a lawful request to exit." 5 minutes. The bravest began to gather their coats. The rest waited to see if Jason would bleed for them or make me do it. He walked toward me in the slow theater of a man who draws courage from an audience. "You can't be serious," he said. "It's my birthday. These are my friends." "This is my home," I answered into the mic. "My deed, my taxes, my liability. I am ending the event." He stepped close enough that I could smell beer and the cheap cologne he bought with my card. He wanted the line to travel. "Without me, you're just a lonely, useless old man." Emily's mouth tugged into a pleased half-smile. Kyle laughed into his knuckles. I let the insult hang, and then I blew it away. "You have 4 minutes," I said, and set the microphone on the table. He threw his arms wide. "Nobody move," he announced, but the authority in his tone crumbled against common sense. The neighbors with the toddlers slipped through the gate. A couple edged along the fence. I went inside, dialed 911 from the landline because I wanted a cord under my hand, and gave the address I had written 1,000 times. "Yes, I am the owner. I have asked guests to leave. Some are refusing. I will meet the officers by the side gate." When I stepped back out, the air had sharpened. Jason paced near the grill like a man who hears a cage closing. "You're doing this?" he asked, voice lifting on the last word. "I told you what would happen," I said. "I am done being the wallet that apologizes." The patrol car rolled to the curb 3 minutes later. A male officer and a female officer came through the gate. Flashlights painted slow circles over the patio. The female officer nodded. "You the homeowner, sir?" "Yes," I said, handing over my driver's license and a folded property tax receipt. "Robert Miller, this is my residence. I have requested that they leave. Several declined." She scanned the address and the seal. "All right," she said. "We'll make a general announcement. Anyone who doesn't live here needs to exit." The male officer lifted his voice. "Party's over. Non-residents leave the property now by order of the homeowner." Bodies shuffled. Chairs scraped. Jason did not move. "I'm not leaving," he said. "This is my home." The female officer looked at me. "Is he a tenant? Lease?" "No lease," I said. "My adult son has been staying here without rent. He does not have a tenancy. I am terminating permission for this gathering. Guests must go." She turned back to Jason. "Sir, step to the sidewalk while we verify residency." He planted his feet and lifted his chin. "No." Her hand hovered near her cuffs. "Don't escalate this," she said. He smirked. "No?" The click of steel is a small sound that echoes for years. They turned him, cuffed him with respectful efficiency, and recited rights. Emily gasped. Kyle sputtered while backing toward the gate. The last guests slipped away. Jason's eyes found mine. Rage lived there, but not surprise. "You'll pay for this," he said. "For the first time," I answered. "You'll pay for something." They walked him down the path Margaret and I swept every Saturday. His sneakers scuffed the concrete where he learned to ride a bike. Then the gate closed. The officers remained professional. The female officer brought me a small clipboard. "We'll note failure to comply and trespass cleared," she said. "Document everything if the issue continues. Consider a formal notice if needed." "I've begun," I told her, and felt the anchor of the folder waiting on the kitchen table. When the red and blue faded from the siding, I sat on the back steps with the microphone across my knees like a tool I had finally used correctly. I did not feel triumphant. I felt like a man who had stopped financing his humiliation. The cracked watch in my pocket pressed into my thigh. "Time is back on my side," I whispered. Inside, the house smelled like lemon and old wood again, instead of beer. I rinsed sticky rings from the counter and returned the chairs to their place. Then I called Howard. He picked up on the second ring. "Well?" he asked. "It's done," I said. Officers cleared the yard. Jason refused to leave. "He's in cuffs." Howard exhaled. "I'm sorry, Robert, but good. You stayed on the right side of the line. Monday, we file. Tonight we plan." "I want this house off the board," I said, surprised by how right the sentence felt. "He treats it like a permanent ATM. I want that machine gone." "Then we accelerate," he said. "I have your deed scan. Value about $800,000 from the comps I pulled. Insurance current, no liens. If you're willing to price sharply, we can target cash. 5-day escrow is possible." "Do it," I said. "I want clean." "We'll serve him a notice revoking any permission to occupy," Howard continued. "We'll reference the incident number from tonight's call. We'll freeze any accounts he's touched, and we'll draft a letter." "What kind of letter?" "The kind that says you're stepping out of the role he assigned you," Howard said. "Polite, cold, legally precise. A father may be open to reconciliation. A homeowner is not open to exploitation." I looked up at Margaret's photo on the mantel. "Make it clear," I said. "I'm done funding my erasure." We worked the list. He dictated while I wrote on the yellow pad, "Notice to quit. Unlawful detainer if necessary. Process server tomorrow. Locksmith after service with counsel present. Utilities in my name only. Card canceled and reissued." We discussed a separate letter to Emily, not because she had standing, but because clarity is disinfectant. Around midnight, Howard's voice softened. "One thing, not as your lawyer." "All right." "You did the right thing," he said. "It won't feel like triumph. Something died. Let it. What comes next is your life." After we hung up, I made coffee. I didn't need and sat with the deed, the insurance declarations, and the property tax receipts. The county seal felt like armor. I imagined the fluorescent chill of the precinct, Jason boiling at anyone who would listen. I didn't relish it. I didn't regret it. Accountability isn't cruelty. It's gravity asserting itself. At 9 in the morning, Carol, the agent, arrived with a leather folio and a disciplined smile. 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,912 square feet, she said. "Hardwoods look great. Fresh paint will help. Price at $799, we'll get multiples. If you want speed, I have 2 cash buyers." "Speed," I said. "Make it clean." "Stager this afternoon, photos by evening, listing tonight," she said. "Or we float a private alert to the cash buyers and skip the circus." Float it. By 10:15, she called from the driveway. First buyer willing to meet ask. No contingencies. Proof of funds in my inbox. 5 business days to close. What's the catch? I asked. No catch, she said. They want their parents nearby. It's a good house. You kept it like a man who loved his life. Send me the offer, I said. Howard arrived at noon with a draft of the notice to quit and 2 letters on firm letterhead. He read the first aloud at my kitchen table while the printer clicked out copies. Dear Jason Miller, this letter documents that your permission to occupy the premises at 214 Oakview Lane has been revoked effective immediately. You are not a tenant and hold no leasehold interest. Any continued presence without the owner's consent will be treated as trespass. It's cold, I said. It's clean, he said. The second letter was to Emily. You are not an owner, tenant, or beneficiary of the property at 214 Oakview Lane. Do not enter without written consent. No sermon, just a line in the sand. We sent a process server that afternoon. Carol texted at 2 that the buyer's funds were verified. At 3, she forwarded the offer. $799,000, earnest money wired by the end of the day, close in 5 business days, buyer pays title and escrow. I initialed the pages with Margaret's pen. When I signed, the house felt quiet. At 4:15, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. Jason's voice came hot. You think you can sell my house out from under me? I'll sue you. I'll ruin you. You're nothing without me. He hung up like a boy who had thrown his last rock and found his hands empty. I saved the voicemail. I didn't return it. At 5, Emily texted, We need to talk. You're overreacting. Families don't call cops. I did not answer. The only replies that mattered had tracking numbers. Evening changed the house. I opened the windows. I washed and stacked the red cups to donate. I set the cracked watch on the table and turned it until the spidered glass lined up with the kitchen light. They thought I was weak, I told Margaret, but now they'll see the consequences. At 7, Carol called again. Wire received. We're in escrow. The title has the file. Expect a draft settlement tomorrow. I stood at the front window and watched our street. A kid on a scooter skimmed past. The maple flickered in the wind like a page being turned. My reflection in the glass looked older and somehow lighter, a man who had finally set down what he could no longer carry. I brewed tea, let it steep too long, threw it out, and brewed another cup. Small corrections. That's how a life is saved. Before bed, I laid the signed offer, the deed, the letters, and the yellow pad in a neat stack on the kitchen table and touched each document the way a farmer tests fence posts. Check the line, test the give, respect the work. I paused at the fireplace. Margaret's picture held the room steady. They thought I was weak, I said softly, but now they'll see consequences. The house answered with the familiar settling sigh of old wood. I turned off the lights and let the dark hold. The plan could run without my supervision now. Escrow ticking, notices served, locks scheduled, the agent briefing title, the lawyer drafting declarations. What remained was the clean edge of a future I had not dared to sketch. Tomorrow would bring signatures and keys collected. The day after might bring a knock from a man who no longer possessed a key. I lay in bed with the watch on the nightstand. Its second hand stopped a small bright blade. I listened to the house hum and spoke one more sentence into the dark. Justice isn't loud, I whispered. It's paperwork and patience and a door that locks. Then I closed my eyes and, for the first time in a long time, slept like a man whose boundaries would be standing in the morning. In the morning, I would sign the settlement statement, hand over keys, and leave a forwarding address for nothing and no one. The house would stop being a weapon. The lesson would stand. I could almost feel the quiet of a new life waiting. Out there, finally. If you're watching this while on the go, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and turn on notifications if you haven't already. The ink had barely dried on the closing papers when I realized how final it all was. After months of sleepless nights, bitter confrontations, and the cruel discovery that my son had plotted against me, the sale of my house was done. $800,000. Those numbers stared back at me from the settlement statement like a reminder that this chapter of my life, heavy as it had been, was now over. I handed the keys to the Johnson family, a young couple with 2 small children who walked through the rooms with wide eyes and laughter. Their joy filled the house in a way mine hadn't for years. I watched them touch the walls, planning where to hang photographs, where to set a crib. I felt no bitterness. In fact, for the first time in a long time, I felt strangely at peace. The house had belonged to me, but it had also become a battlefield of betrayal. Letting it go felt like cutting loose an anchor I no longer wanted to drag behind me. The morning Jason came back from prison was strangely quiet. I had imagined he might storm in, pounding on the door, demanding what he thought was his. Instead, he walked up the driveway slowly, shoulders slouched, clutching a set of keys that no longer opened anything. I was already gone from that house, but the Johnsons were there, moving boxes into their new home. Jason must have expected me, or perhaps expected the house to stand still in time, waiting for him to reclaim it like some birthright. Instead, he was met by strangers who looked at him with confusion. I wasn't there to see his face, but I imagined the moment vividly because I had left him something. On the porch, taped to the mailbox, was a letter in my handwriting. "You wanted me gone," it read. "Wish granted." That single line carried the weight of everything I couldn't say to his face anymore. My son had wanted to push me out of my own home, and now he was the one left standing outside, key useless in his hand. The story of his downfall spread quickly. Friends who once admired his arrogance turned away when they realized there was nothing left to gain from him. The false charm he had built his life on crumbled when the foundation of inheritance was gone. I heard through neighbors that he spent nights drifting from couch to couch until even those doors closed on him. Eventually, he was spotted sleeping under a bridge near the edge of town. Unshaven, hollow-eyed, the smell of cheap liquor clinging to him. That was the path he chose, paved not by my rejection, but by his betrayal. People often ask me if I regret what I did. My answer is always the same. No, he dug that grave with his own hands. For me, life took a different turn. I left behind the cold Midwestern winters and moved to Arizona. With $200,000, I bought a modest condo just outside Phoenix. It wasn't grand, not like the house I had given up, but it was mine in a new way. It overlooked a park filled with mesquite trees and cactus blooms. Every morning I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee, listening to the desert wake up, birds chirping, children laughing on their way to school, the rustle of the warm wind. There was no tension in the walls, no arguments echoing down the hallways. Just sunlight, wide-open skies, and silence that felt like freedom. Some might say I downsized. I say I reclaimed my life. I started filling my days with things I had once put aside. I painted again messy canvases that no one but me would ever see. I joined a local community center where seniors gathered to share stories, play chess, and volunteer at food drives. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who respected me, not because of what I owned, but because of who I was. One woman, Eleanor, a widow who loved gardening, leaned over to me one afternoon and said, "You look lighter than most folks who move here. Did you leave something heavy behind?" I smiled and answered simply, "Yes, a house full of betrayal." Jason tried to reach out once. He found my number somehow and called late at night. His voice was hoarse, broken, begging for forgiveness. I listened in silence, letting his words spill through the receiver. He spoke of being lost, of needing a place to stay, of wanting another chance. For a moment, my heart wavered. After all, he was my son, blood of my blood. But then I remembered the years of manipulation, the lies, the way he had looked me in the eye and tried to strip me of everything I worked for. Respect was the line he had crossed, and once it's gone, it doesn't come back. "Jason," I finally said, my voice steady. "I hope you find your way, but I can't let you back into my life, not anymore." Then I hung up. I sat in the quiet after the call, and for the first time, I didn't cry. Instead, I whispered to myself, "I don't need them anymore. I have myself." That sentence became my anchor, stronger than any house or inheritance. His decline grew worse. The last I heard, he was living in a rundown shelter, working odd jobs that barely kept him afloat. He was no longer the son I raised. He had become a man consumed by greed and brought down by his own choices. People who once cheered him on now spoke of him with pity or disgust. He became a ghost in his town, while I flourished in mine. The contrast was stark, and though part of me mourned what could have been, a larger part knew it was justice. Betrayal always eats itself in the end. In Arizona, I found a peace I had never known. I took long walks at sunset, the sky painted in purples and reds that no painter could ever capture. I cooked simple meals for myself, grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, sometimes just a sandwich and soup, and each bite tasted like freedom. I had enough money to live comfortably, but more importantly, I had the weight off my chest. No more waiting for the next fight. No more suspicion of what scheme Jason might be planning behind my back. Just me, the desert, and the knowledge that I had chosen dignity over despair. The lesson carved itself into my soul. Family is about respect, not entitlement. Blood alone doesn't bind us. It's the way we treat one another, the honesty we show, the love we honor. Jason believed he was entitled to my house, my savings, my life's work, simply because he was my son. But entitlement without respect is nothing but theft dressed in family ties. I will never again mistake obligation for love. That truth, though hard-won, has given me more peace than any inheritance ever could. Sometimes, when I sit with neighbors at the community center, they ask about my past. I tell them parts of it, never all. I describe the house I once owned, the betrayal I endured, and the freedom I found after letting go. They nod, understanding in their ways. Many have lived through similar battles, siblings fighting over wills, children demanding money, spouses turning cruel. Betrayal, it seems, wears many faces, but the antidote is always the same: self-respect. One evening, a man named George, who had lost his farm to a brother's greed, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You did the right thing, Robert. You saved yourself." His words stayed with me. Yes, I saved myself, and that was enough. I keep Jason's letter, the one I left for him, framed in my mind like a painting. "You wanted me gone. Wish granted." It wasn't cruel, it was the truth, and truth has a way of setting you free. He may never forgive me. He may hate me until the day he dies, but that is his burden, not mine. My burden lifted the moment I closed that door and opened a new one in Arizona. As I sit here now, looking out at the horizon where the desert meets the sky, I feel a calm that words can barely capture. Life after betrayal isn't just survival, it's renewal. I am living proof of that. Tonight, as the cicadas sing and the last light fades, I make myself a promise. I will spend the rest of my days honoring the peace I fought for. I will not waste another minute on regret. My journey isn't over, it's just entering a gentler chapter. Tomorrow morning, I'll head down to the community center. They're organizing a new volunteer project, helping local kids plant a community garden. I've already signed up. My hands are old, my back sometimes aches, but I want to feel the soil again, to see something grow from care and patience. Maybe that's what life is about in the end, planting seeds that last longer than betrayal, tending to what brings joy instead of pain. And so I close this chapter with a heart lighter than it has ever been. I lost a house, but I gained myself. I lost a son to greed, but I found a community built on respect. And as the desert wind brushes against my face, I know this story isn't just about loss. It's about becoming whole again. The mornings in my new apartment began quietly, with the soft hum of the city waking up around me. At 68, I had never thought I would start over, yet here I was, finding comfort in small routines that once seemed ordinary but now felt like blessings. I would lace up my shoes and walk through the park just 2 blocks away, nodding to familiar faces and sometimes stopping to watch children chase each other under the old oak trees. In the afternoons, I joined a small group at the community center where we played chess, shared coffee, and talked about books, gardening, or memories of the past. Each move across the chessboard reminded me that life, too, is about strategy, patience, and knowing when to let go. After the storm of betrayal, these simple pleasures felt like victories. They were mine, untouched by greed or lies, and they made every day lighter than the last. Jason, on the other hand, had chosen his path. Word reached me that he was living in a cramped apartment on the other side of town, the kind where the walls are thin and the carpets smell of dampness. He had sent a letter, folded neatly into an envelope, with handwriting I once recognized instantly. The words inside were heavy with apology, regret, and pleas for understanding. But I placed the letter back into its envelope and tucked it away in a drawer, unopened after the first glance. My heart was calm, not hardened, but resolved. I whispered to myself as I slid the drawer shut, I don't need their apology. I have my life, my dignity, and my peace. One afternoon, a small package arrived. It was from the Johnsons, old neighbors who had witnessed much of the unraveling of my family. Inside lay my father's watch, its face cracked from years of wear, but still gleaming faintly with the memories it carried. They had found it among things Jason had discarded in anger, and they believed it belonged with me. I held it in my palm, feeling the weight of history and love far greater than any sum of money. That watch, with its broken glass and ticking heart, reminded me that true value lies not in wealth, but in the memories and character that endure. I set it carefully on my desk, where the afternoon light would catch it, a quiet guardian of my past and a symbol of my survival. Every day since, I've walked forward with a steady step. I joined a charity group that knits blankets for nursing homes, finding joy in giving warmth to strangers who soon became friends. Laughter returned to my evenings, echoing in small kitchens and community halls where no one cared about bank accounts or inheritances, only about stories shared and kindness offered. In these simple acts, I felt a freedom I had never known before, a sense of belonging I had once searched for in my own family, but never found. The contrast between my life and Jason's is not one I celebrate with bitterness, but with clarity. His choices brought him loneliness, while mine brought me peace. I learned that self-respect is the greatest inheritance a person can carry, and boundaries are the walls that protect it. I do not answer his letters, for silence is sometimes the loudest declaration of freedom. My story no longer revolves around betrayal, but around renewal. As I look out from my balcony toward the park, where the leaves turn gold each autumn, I know I have closed the chapter with finality. The past may have tried to break me, but it did not succeed. I am here, whole, standing in the light of my choosing. The story has come to an end. It has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.